All right, guys, so here we are on day 2. So we've got several things going on at the same time. I'm going to put a little bit of footage on the front of this where I started some of it yesterday. It's a little rainy and crappy out today, but that's okay. You know, that's the way it is when you're working outside. It doesn't matter what the temperature is, especially once you start a project like this. You only have a certain amount of time to get things done, other than if you've got furs drying. Then you can just sit and let them do whatever they got to do. But if you're getting ready to tan them, or you've got them in liquid of some kind, then you've got timelines you have to abide by. So you just got to get out in the weather and do it. We've got our pickling bucket right here below me that's got 2 hides in it now. It's got a red fox in it that we put in it yesterday, and it's got a gray fox in it. The gray fox was put in here only because we need to flush it, and it wasn't soft enough really to flush it out yesterday. It was really hard because it was cold and it had been frozen. So I went ahead and pickled it to make sure the hair didn't slip, and now, while it's wet, I can still scrape it, and then I can degrease it. At the same time, I'm degreasing the red fox that we did yesterday because it's been in the pickling solution long enough. I just kind of reversed the order on it. It doesn't really matter that much. If you need to do those things, you understand what you can get away with the more you do this. And then we have our possum hide that we degreased yesterday that's been hanging overnight, and it is to the point where it's damp, but it's not wet anymore. So what we're going to do with that is we're going to apply our egg tan solution to it, which has got the lecithin in it, which is an emulsifying fatty type oil that will help to tan that hide. So we've got some water on the boil over in the Pathfinder kitchen to heat that up. We don't want it to be boiling. We don't want to cook eggs in it. We want it to be warm. So we're going to take it off the boil, let it cool down a little bit, mix our eggs with that, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And we're going to get that hide soaking in that solution for 24 hours. So 12 to 24. Probably doesn't really take that long for a possum, but we'll probably leave it in there till tomorrow and go with it from there. And today we'll work on these other 2 hides that we've got as well in the bucket. So I'm going to move the camera here. We're going to get this hide out of the bucket and see where we're at on the gray and see where we're at on the red fox. All right, so unfortunately, I got a feeling I'm going to have to get my hands wet before this is over with, but we'll find out here in a minute. All right, so here's our gray fox. Yeah, that's our gray right there. All right, we'll kind of wring him out in this pickling solution. And you can see he's still got some flushing that needs to be done on him. So we'll wring him out and then we'll do that flushing here in a minute. And we'll go ahead and get our red fox out of here. That's ready to go. We'll wring this guy out a little bit better. Doesn't matter how wet he is really because we're going to flush him anyway. Now, the red fox on the other hand, if we can get to it here, without getting our gloves wet, that's going to be the trick to that, or without getting our sleeves wet. There we go. Okay, so here's our red fox. Now, our red fox, we're going to have to turn it right side out. So we're going to get our hands wet in this cold weather doing this no matter what. We're going to wring this hide out pretty good. We want to put it back on a stretcher because now it's to the point where it's ready to apply tanning liquor to it once it dries out a little bit. So we'll take it over to a degreaser and we'll put it in there. We'll run it through that degreaser for about 30 minutes or half an hour after we turn it inside out. And then we will see how it looks and put it on a stretcher. And then we'll decide if it's ready to go to the tanning solution or not. All right? So that's where we're at right now. So let me get this turned inside out. Again, I'm going to have to get my hands wet to do this. I don't have a choice. I've got to turn this thing all the way the other direction. And that's part of what happens with this stuff is. It wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't cold outside. But it's about 30 degrees out here, 32 degrees, something like that. All right. We don't have any hair slipping off of it. That's a great sign, okay? Now, so there we've got it turned the other direction. And I'm looking at it to see if it needs degreased. And it looks like it might need to be degreased. But I don't know, some of that could just be coloration of the skin. It actually doesn't look too bad. We may be able to skip the decreasing stage on this guy. I don't know that for sure. We might be able to. I'm kind of feeling it with my hands to see if it feels greasy or not. If it feels greasy, then I'm going to put it back in that degreasing solution. If it feels greasy when you're touching it with your hands, it feels slimy, then it probably needs to go in the degreasing solution. So that's where we're gonna put this bad boy for the moment. All right, so we've got this Fox back on the flushing beam, and you can see these areas that still have a lot of flesh on them. And that's kind of where this tool shines, is around these armpit areas that are tough to get to with a large flushing knife. You can get in there, get under those armpits and stuff, and get that meat out of there. And once I get it down around the body area, I won't worry so much about it because I can take the rest of it off with a flushing knife. But getting up around these armpits and things like that, now with this smaller tool, is going to make it much less likely that I'm going to dig into, rip an arm or anything like that when I start to flush this again. And now that we're wet, it's going to flush much easier. Now, you got to be careful when you get around this tail area because you can pull that whole tail off there pretty easy if you're not careful. You just get it the best you can, and then don't be real careful around that tail. All right, so now we have our red fox and our gray fox back on stretchers. They've been through the pickling, they've been through the degreasing, and now they're hanging up here till they get kind of tacky wet like our possum is right now. It's still damp, but it's not soaking wet. And that's really where we want to be before we apply tanning solution. So the next step now for us is, A, we need to wait until these two become tacky. As that's happening, or before we put the tanning liquor on them, we can trim little pieces off and things like that that we might have missed while they're on the stretcher. It's not a problem at all to do that with our pocket knife or whatever we choose to use. There's not a whole lot left on here that I can see. Maybe a couple of spots under the arm on one. I think it was on the red fox. Might be a little bit of trimming needs to be done. Other than that, we're in good shape. Now, if you've got a hole in the hide, whether it was a hole from a gunshot wound or whether it was a hole that you accidentally tore a hole in the hide when you were flushing it, as long as it's not a giant gaping tear, you can fix that stuff fairly easily. What we'll do is we'll let them dry to that tacky stage, and before we put the tanning liquor on them, we will sew that shut with some sinew and a needle, and then we'll go ahead and tan it just like it didn't have a hole in it, and we'll go from there, all right? We could also wait until after we were done to go ahead and sew that up till we were done tanning it completely and then sew it up. The problem I find with that is if you get a hole started in a hide that's very good size at all, and you start to stretch that hide to tan it, you'll make that hole worse. So the sooner you can sew that hole up and get away with it, the better off you are. And so the stage I like to do it at is this stage right before I put the tanning liquor on the hide. Now we're going to use a commercial tanning liquor on these two hides. And I think we're going to try to do two different types of tanning liquor. We're going to use New-Tan on one, and I think it's called Indian Joe on the other one. I've never used Indian Joe before. Should be here in the mail today or tomorrow. And we'll make up a tanning liquor with that. We'll try that on one hide, and we'll use a New-Tan on the other hide. And then this possum hide that we have here, we're now to the stage where we need to make up the brain tanning liquor or the fatty tanning liquor with egg yolks that we talked about. So we're going to get to that next. All right, so what I did was I've got 7 egg yolks in here. And I've mixed them up fairly well. And I have a couple quarts of water here. And this water, you don't want it to be any more than warm. And I'm going to fill this container up right here. about 3/4 of the way full. Again, I'm a guesstimation kind of guy. And I'm going to mix that up really, really well. So I'm going to mix this up with a stick really, really well. Make sure that I get those egg yolks mixed with that water. All right, now to the hide. I'm going to take the hide off of the stretcher. And again, it should be tacky, wet, still soft, but it should not be greasy at all. If you feel grease on that thing, it ain't ready, okay? This is pretty good. It's not horrible bad. Got a little bullet hole right there. We'll fix that later. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a 5-gallon bucket. We're going to put the hide in there, and we're going to put our tanning solution in there. And we're going to move that around in that tanning liquor really, really good, and basically soak it in there. We need enough liquid in here basically to get this hide submerged. So again, if we need to put a weight on top of it to hold it down, that's what I'll do. Mix it around there for a good 5 or 10 minutes. Get that egg solution soaked into that hide really well. Again, we've got the hide side out and the hair side in, because the hair side doesn't really matter. We want it on the hide side. So we just want to get it good and soaked with that stuff. Once we've done that for 5-10 minutes, just to make sure that it's good and worked into the leather, or worked into the hide we're trying to make into leather, I like to sit the thing upright and make sure that the whole hide is going to be underwater. That way, if I have to add a little bit more from where it's soaking into the skin, I can do that to make sure that the hide stays submerged. And then again, just put a weight on top of it to hold it down in there. Make sure there's no air pockets in it. Push any air out of it, you have to push out of it. Get the hide to stay at the bottom. And then you've got this, and we're just going to let her sit for about 12 hours. All right, so once you get to that point, you're just going to let that hide sit in there for about 12 hours. And we're going to come back. We're going to see where we're at, okay? We may have to do that more than one time. We'll rinse it out, wring it out, start to dry it, pull it, and things like that to stretch it out. And if it's got hard spots in it and things like that, we'll have to put it back in tanning solution again. If not, we got it done the first time. That's kind of this trick with this brain or lesson in tanning, is that you may not get it right the first time. So you got to kind of just trial and error the thing, okay? I think we've got enough egg yolks in there. I use like 7. It only takes like 12 for a deer hide. So I use 7 in here. That should be more than enough. Probably about, I don't know, if I had to guess, I'd say there's a 1/2 gallon maybe of water in this bucket. It's up to, it's only 3 or 4 inches up on the bucket. We got the hide submerged in it, and now we wait. All right, guys, so we got 3 things going on at one time right now. We've got our 2 fox hides up here drying out so that they're ready to put on tanning liquor once they're to that tacky dry stage, like our possum was at. Our possum is now in a brain tanning type solution that we made with egg yolks and water, warm water. And we're going to let that sit for 12 hours. We're going to let these things dry. We'll go on to part 3 of this video. I'm trying to keep it as condensed as possible, but give you as much information as I can. You're not going to learn from this video series what you could learn coming to a hands-on class, but I'm going to give you enough information to where you can actually try to start experimenting with tanning hides on your own. So listen, guys, I appreciate your views and I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, for our business. I'll be back with the 3rd video in this series as soon as I can, guys. Thanks.